Hello, and welcome back to Math 7 with Mr. Passon. Today we are continuing our Unit 9. It's volume. Today we're actually going to discuss what volume is and how we find it. So one definition of volume is the total capacity of a three-dimensional object. And we'll talk about that in greater detail in just a moment. Or we could describe it as it describes how much space the object occupies. And I did not spell capacity right. Let me fix that. Alright. Now, before, when we talked about surface area, we thought about like how many post-it notes, how many little squares it would take to cover the outside. Well, here we're going to assume that this shape, that we're going to fill that shape or make that shape out of cubes, and we're going to ask how many cubes it would take to fill it up. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to think of it as layers of cubes. Like in this one, we're going to look at our base, and here our base is this region, so we can go ahead and shade that in. I'm going to grab I guess my pencil tool. Well, maybe I'll just scribble it in. So here is one base, right? And here is the other base. And I need to touch that scribble tool in between each. And then over here is one base. And this on the bottom is a second base. Likewise, we have our base here and our base. Oh, it did not draw. I don't know why it didn't draw, but it didn't draw. That base, and then we have that base. Right? So, when we're thinking about volume, right, we can describe by finding the area of the base. So we can find the area of the base and then multiplying by the height. And there what we can think of is, well, there's a certain number of cubes that would fill up the bottom, and then the height tells us how many groups of that number of cubes. So if there were, say, 4 cubes on the bottom here, and it was 7 stacks of 4, well, that would be 4 times 7. If there were 20 on this bottom row, and it could stack up 4 tall, then it'd be 20 groups of 4. So it's the area of the base tells us how many cubes are in a row, or in a sheet, and then times the height. But the cool thing is that works even when it's not a rectangular prism. It works on all prisms. And we get a formula that the volume of a prism is always going to be V equals the area of the base times the height. Now, for a rectangular prism, well, the area of the base is the length times the width, and the height is h, so we have length times width times height. Alright? And our other way that we're going to often write that is we're going to write V equals I don't like the way that they write it, so we're going to write it a little bit different. I'm actually going to write A, Control B times H. So area of the base times height. So this little b down here tells me that it's the area of the base. Alright? And again, we'll use that subscript, and to get that subscript, Control comma in Google Docs. So, let's look at this one, finding the volume of this particular one. Well, we can think of it as the base is the length times the width, right? So we know that our base equals length times width, and then our volume, I guess the area of our base, and our volume equals the area of our base, control comma, comma, times our height. Right? So the area of our base, well, the base is a rectangle, so we have 9 times 6, and that's going to be 54, and that means our volume is 54 times 4.5, which when we do that, the multiplication, our volume equals 243 centimeters to the third power. So it would take 243 little centimeter cubes to fill it up. There'd be 54 on this bottom row, and there would be 4.5 rows. Alright? So that's one way that we can deal with volume. Now you'll notice, particularly for rectangular prisms, it ended up being 6 times 9 times 4.5. Things will get a little bit more complicated when the base is a triangle or a parallelogram or any other shape that is not a rectangle. So let's go ahead and continue. Good. So for rectangular prisms, we know that it's the area of the base times the height. And in fact, that's going to hold for triangular prisms, and in fact for all prisms. But the area of a base for every rectangle is just length times width. So we can start filling in these, each one, and we can do our calculations. And so I'm going to have to zoom out a little bit to be able to show my work and be able to see it in the first one at the same time. So for 1, we've got our base times our width, so we've got 8.5, our length times our width, 8.5 times 4. That is our base, times our height is 6. Alright, so we just have to do that multiplication. For number 2, well, length times our width, that's 8 times 8, times our height is 1.5. Alright. For number 3, and that's this one here, the cereal box, well, our base is 3 times 18, and then times 22. Okay, for our number 4, that's the tissue box, that is 9.2 times 25, that's our base, times 10 for our height. This one, well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is, by the way, number 5. So it's 5 times 2 for my base. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So times 4 tall. For number 6, it is 6 times 12 times 3.1. And I'm going to put that down here. And then I'm going to start a new row for 7 so the numbers actually match up with our work area here. What is the multiplication for 7 going to be? Notice that in this case I converted the fraction to a decimal. That would make my answer a decimal. You could also convert it back to a fraction, but for me it was easier to type a decimal than it was to type a fraction. So again, with number 10 here, let's just count the sides. So that's 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 times 5 times 2. 11, it's 2 times 2 times 2. And then 12, it's 5. 1/5 is 0.2. So I just know that. You might not know that. You could definitely leave it as a fraction and have an answer as your fraction, or have a fraction as your answer. But that only worked because the base was a rectangle. So otherwise we're going to have to figure out how to find the area of that base. So there's not a whole lot to this, but we will see how it gets more complicated as we make our shapes a little bit more complicated. You'll see there is an assignment to practice on. Go ahead and make sure to do that, and I'll catch you next time.